The wind howled through the valley like a wounded beast, carrying with it the stinging bite of a winter that had arrived early and with a vengeance. It was late December, the time of year when the high country buried itself under feet of snow, turning the world into a stark, silent expanse of white. For Mai Lin, the isolation was not a curse, but a shield. In the 3 years since her father had passed, worked to death in the mines before they could scrape together enough gold to return to Guangdong, she had learned that the forest was safer than the towns. The towns held stares, whispers, and the kind of hostility that did not need words to cut deep. Here, in the small, drafty cabin tucked against the spine of the mountain, the only enemies were the cold and the hunger, and those were honest adversaries. Mai Lin stood by the frost-crusted window, her breath hitching as a sound pierced the howling gale. It wasn't the wind. It was the guttural, hungry snarl of wolves. She grabbed the heavy iron skillet, she had no ammunition left for her father's rusted rifle, and pressed her back against the rough-hewn door. Her heart hammered against her ribs like a trapped bird. The wolves were close. She could hear the crunch of snow under heavy paws, the scratching of claws against the frozen earth of her porch. But then, another sound cut through the darkness, sharper and far more terrifying than the growls. A child's scream. Mai Lin's instinct was self-preservation. She was a lone Chinese woman in a territory that saw her as less than human, opening that door was madness. But the scream came again, high and terrified, followed by a man's roar, a sound of desperate, protective fury. Mai Lin didn't think. She threw the heavy wooden bolt and kicked the door open. The wind slammed into her, blinding in its intensity, bringing a swirl of ice and snow. Through the whiteout, she saw them. A shadowed figure of a man swinging a thick branch like a club, backing away toward her cabin, and behind him, a small bundle of a boy, buried in snow up to his waist. Circling them were 5 distinct shapes, eyes glowing yellow in the lantern light spilling from her doorway. "Get inside!" Mai Lin screamed, her voice cracking from disuse. The man didn't hesitate. He scooped the boy up in one fluid motion, abandoning his defense to make a break for the light. A wolf lunged, snapping at his heels, tearing the fabric of his coat. Mai Lin stepped onto the porch, banging the skillet hard against the door frame. The metallic clang rang out like a gunshot in the crisp air. Startled, the pack flinched, their ears pinning back. "Go," she shouted again, ushering the strangers over the threshold. The man crashed inside, clutching the boy to his chest. Mai Lin slammed the door shut, dropping the heavy bar back into place just as a heavy body thudded against the wood from the outside. She stood there, chest heaving, listening to the scratches and whines fade as the pack realized their prey had vanished. Silence, heavy and awkward, filled the small room. The only sound was the crackle of the dying fire and the chattering of the boy's teeth. Mai Lin turned slowly to look at her guests. The man was tall, filling the small space with a presence that felt both imposing and exhausted. He was covered in snow, his beard frosted white, his face obscured by the brim of a battered hat. But it was the boy who drew her gaze. He couldn't have been more than 6 years old, his face pale and blue-lipped, eyes wide with lingering terror. "The fire," Mai Lin said, moving quickly. "He needs heat." The man nodded, sinking to his knees on the rug. He began to strip the wet outer layers from the boy with hands that shook, not from cold, she realized, but from adrenaline. "Thank you," he rasped. His voice was deep, textured like rough gravel. We lost the horses. The ravine. The storm came out of nowhere. "It is the season for it," Mai Lin said softly. She busied herself with the hearth, feeding precious logs into the embers until the flames roared to life. She placed a kettle of water on the hook. "You are foolish to travel the pass this close to Christmas." The man paused, looking up at her. He removed his hat, revealing a head of dark hair plastered to his forehead and eyes the color of steel, currently clouded with worry. He looked at her features, her dark almond eyes, her black hair pulled back in a practical braid, and for a moment, she braced herself for the look. The look of confusion or disgust that usually followed. But he only looked grateful. "I know," he said. "I was trying to get him home. I miscalculated." He turned back to the boy. Sam? Can you hear me, buddy? You're safe. The boy, Sam, nodded weakly. He was shivering violently. Mylin moved to her small chest in the corner and pulled out her only spare quilt, a patchwork of heavy wool. She handed it to the man. Wrap him in this. I will make ginger tea. It warms the blood. The man took the quilt, his fingers brushing hers. His skin was ice cold, but his grip was gentle. I'm Nathaniel, he said. Nate. This is my son, Sam. I am Mylin. She retreated to the small kitchenette area, her hands trembling slightly as she sliced a knob of ginger. She was alone with two strange men, well, a man and a boy, in a blizzard that showed no sign of stopping. If he wanted to harm her, there was little she could do. But as she watched him rub warmth into his son's arms, whispering soft reassurances, the fear began to recede, replaced by a strange, aching familiarity. She remembered her father holding her that way when the fever had taken her mother. She brought them 2 steaming mugs. Nate took his with a nod, but held it to Sam's lips first. Sip, Sammy. Just a little. The boy drank, coughing slightly at the spice, but the color began to return to his cheeks. Nate drank next, sighing as the heat hit his stomach. He looked around the cabin. It was one room, spare and clean. Dried herbs hung from the rafters, sage, ginseng, mint. A small altar sat on a shelf with a fading picture of an older Chinese man and a stick of incense. We have intruded on your home, Nate said quietly. I have money. I can pay for the food, the shelter. Mylin shook her head, sitting on a wooden stool near the fire, keeping a respectable distance. Money is no good to the wolves, and it does not burn well for heat. You are here because the storm decided it. Tonight, that is enough. Nate studied her, his eyes intelligent and piercing. You live here alone? This far from the settlement. It is quieter, she said simply. And safer. He seemed to understand the weight of that. He didn't pry. The storm is getting worse, he noted, listening to the wind batter the roof shingles. I fear we may be imposing for more than one night. Mylin looked at the window, now completely opaque with frost. Then we wait. But I warn you, my supplies are humble. Rice. Dried fish. Some preserved vegetables. I've eaten worse, Nate said with a faint, tired smile. And Sam? Sam just needs to be warm. The boy had stopped shivering. He blinked heavy eyelids, looking at Mylin. Are you a snow angel? He whispered. Mylin blinked, surprised. A small smile touched her lips, the first in a long time. No, little one. I am just Mylin. You saved us, Sam murmured, his voice slurring with sleep. Rest now, Nate said, pulling the boy against his chest. He looked at Mylin over his son's head. He's right, you know. We wouldn't have lasted another hour out there. Sleep, Mylin commanded gently. I will watch the fire. That night, Mylin did not sleep. She sat in the rocking chair, her father's rifle across her lap, useless as it was a comfort, watching the strangers sleep on her rug. Nate slept with one arm thrown protectively over his son. They wore clothes that were well made, she noticed now. The wool was thick, the stitching precise. Nate's boots were leather, scuffed but high quality. Perhaps a merchant, or a lawyer from the city. It didn't matter. In this cabin, they were just souls seeking shelter. The dawn brought no sun, only a grey, heavy light filtering through the snow-packed windows. The storm had settled in, a white curtain cutting them off from the world. For the next 3 days, the cabin became a small, enclosed universe. Nate proved to be a man of his word, and a man of work. He did not sit idly. Despite his exhaustion, he insisted on earning his keep. He fixed the leg of her table that had wobbled for a year. He restacked her firewood pile indoors to dry it out. He was respectful, always knocking before entering if he went out to check the weather, always averting his gaze when she washed her face in the basin. Sam, having recovered from the chill, was a ball of curiosity. He was a sweet child, with messy brown hair and eyes that held a sadness too deep for his age. "What is this?" Sam asked on the second day, pointing to the calligraphy brushes on her shelf. "Those belong to my father," Mylin explained, kneeling beside him. "He taught me to write characters. To capture words on paper. Can you show me?" Mylin glanced at Nate, who was whittling a piece of kindling by the fire. He nodded encouragingly. She cleared a space on the table. She had no ink left, so she used water on a slate board. The damp marks appeared dark and sharp before slowly fading. She drew the character for home. "This means family," she lied slightly, simplifying it for him. "A roof, and a pig underneath. It means shelter and food and being together." Sam tried to copy it, his small tongue protruding in concentration. "Where is your family?" he asked innocently. Mylin's hand stilled. "They are with the ancestors now." "My mama is an angel," Sam said matter-of-factly. "She went away last Christmas. That's why Papa is sad." Mylin looked up to find Nate watching them, his expression raw. He looked away quickly, focusing on the fire. The pieces clicked into place. The reckless journey through the storm, the shadows in his eyes. He was running from a ghost, trying to outrun grief on the anniversary of his loss. "I am sorry," Mylin said softly to the room. It's been a hard year," Nate said, his voice rough. "We were heading to my sister's in the city. I thought a change of scenery would help him." "Help me?" "The heart carries its burdens wherever the feet go," Mylin said. She rose and went to the pot hanging over the fire. "But sometimes, the snow forces us to stop and put the burden down, just for a while." She ladled out bowls of kanji, rice porridge cooked down until it was creamy, topped with the last of her dried scallions and salted fish. It was peasant food, the food of her childhood. Nate took the bowl. "This smells wonderful." "It is kanji. It heals the stomach." They ate together at the small table. It was intimate, a domesticity that felt dangerous to Mylin because she knew it was temporary. "Tomorrow is Christmas Eve," Sam announced suddenly, scraping his bowl. "Santa won't find us here. The chimney is too small." Nate winced. "Sam, we talked about this. Santa knows where you are, but the storm. He can't fly in a blizzard," Sam finished glumly. "I know." Mylin looked at the disappointed boy, then at the pained father. She thought of her own childhood, poor but filled with the magic her father created out of nothing. "The storm may stop Santa's sleigh," Mylin said, "but the spirits of the mountain are ancient. They do not mind the wind." Sam's eyes went wide. "Spirits. Good spirits," she assured him. "And Christmas. Christmas is about light in the darkness. We can make our own light." That afternoon, Mylin opened her trunk. She pulled out a stack of red paper she had been saving for the Lunar New Year. She sat Sam down and taught him how to fold. They made cranes, frogs, and stars. Nate joined in, his large, calloused hands surprisingly delicate as he folded the fragile paper. They strung the red paper shapes on a piece of twine and hung them across the mantel. In the firelight, the red paper glowed warmly. "It looks like magic," Sam whispered. "It is," Mylin said. On Christmas Eve, the wind finally died down, leaving a silence so profound it rang in the ears. The cabin was warm. Mylin brought out a jar of preserved plums, a rare treat. Nate contributed a silver flask of brandy he had in his coat, adding a splash to their tea. "To shelter," Nate toasted, raising his mug. "To kindness," Mylin replied. "To Christmas." Sam cheered. After Sam had fallen asleep, clutching a red paper crane, Nate and Mylin sat by the fire. The atmosphere had shifted. The wariness was gone, replaced by a quiet understanding. "You have a gift with him," Nate said, looking at his sleeping son. "He hasn't smiled like that in months. He is a good boy." He just needs to know he is not alone. I try, Nate said, leaning forward, his elbows on his knees. But I feel like I'm failing him. I have resources, my Lin. I can buy him anything. Toys, clothes, tutors. But I can't buy him a mother. I can't buy him the feeling of a home. A house is made of wood, my Lin said, staring into the flames. A home is made of memory and care. You are building it, even if you do not see it. You held him through the storm. That is what he will remember. Nate turned his head, his grey eyes locking onto hers. The intensity of his gaze made her breath catch. And you? Who holds you through the storms? My Lin looked down at her hands, rough, work-worn hands. I hold myself. It is the only way. It doesn't have to be, Nate said softly. He reached out, his hand hovering over hers before he pulled back, respecting the boundary between them. You are the strongest woman I have ever met, my Lin. And the most generous. To take in two strangers who might have been bandits. I saw how you held the child, she said. A bad man does not protect the weak with his own body. My Lin, he said, testing the sound of her name. When this storm clears. I don't want to just walk away and leave you here. It's too hard a life for one person. It is my life, she said, though her voice wavered. I do not fit in your world, Nate. I have seen your world. They look at my eyes and they see a servant, or a joke, or a threat. Here, the trees do not care. Then the world is wrong, Nate said fiercely. And I will tell them so. The moment hung between them, fragile and electric. But before it could settle, a loud crack echoed from the roof, the weight of the snow shifting. The spell broke. We should rest, my Lin said, standing up abruptly. The thaw will come tomorrow. Christmas Day broke with a blinding brilliance. The sun fractured over the miles of pristine white snow. The storm was over. Nate went out early to check the perimeter. He returned with a grim but determined expression. The drifts are deep, but the crust is hard. I can walk on top of it. There is a town. Maybe 10 miles south. Yes, my Lin said, feeling a hollow ache in her chest. Silver Creek. I will walk there, Nate said. I'll hire a sleigh and horses. I'll come back for Sam. And for you. You do not need to come back for me, my Lin said, turning away to hide her face. You go. Live your life. Nate grabbed her shoulders, turning her to face him. I am coming back. Do you hear me? I owe you my life. My son's life. I am coming back. He left an hour later. Sam cried, clinging to my Lin's skirts until Nate swore on his life, that he would return by sunset with a carriage. The hours dragged. My Lin tried to keep Sam entertained, but her own anxiety was a tight knot in her stomach. What if he fell? What if the wolves returned? Or worse? What if he reached the town, realized he was a wealthy man safe in civilization, and decided that the Chinese woman in the shack wasn't worth the effort of the return trip? She had been disappointed by people before. The sun began to dip behind the peaks, casting long, purple shadows across the snow. Sam was watching by the window. He's coming. Sam shouted. My Lin ran to the door. In the distance, against the white expanse, a dark shape moved. It wasn't just a sleigh. It was a team of 4 massive draft horses pulling a sturdy carriage, flanked by 3 men on horseback. Nate had returned. And he hadn't come quietly. The cavalcade pulled up to the cabin. Nate jumped from the sleigh before it even stopped moving. He strode up the porch and scooped Sam into his arms, then looked at My Lin. I told you, he said, breathless. Behind him, a burly man with a mustache, the foreman, presumably, tipped his hat. Boss told us you saved his hide. Boss? My Lin looked at Nate. Nate rubbed the back of his neck, looking slightly sheepish. I may have downplayed things. I own the Circle T Ranch. About 40 miles east. My Lin's eyes widened. The Circle T was legendary. It was the largest cattle operation in the territory. The owner was rumored to be a millionaire, a man of immense power. And he had been sleeping on her rug, eating her watery rice porridge. "You are Nathaniel Thorne," she whispered. "I am," he said. "Does it matter?" "It matters," she said, stepping back. "Rich men and poor girls. That is a story that does not end well." "We'll write a new ending," Nate said. He extended his hand. "Come with us, my Lin. Just for Christmas dinner. Please. Sam won't leave without you." Sam looked at her, his eyes pleading. "Please, my? We have a big tree." My Lin looked at her lonely cabin, then at the hand of the man who looked at her as if she were a queen. She took his hand. The journey to the ranch was a blur. When they arrived, My Lin gasped. The main house was a sprawling mansion of stone and timber, glowing with gaslight. Servants bustled about. When Nate led her inside, the warmth was immediate and luxurious. But the stairs were there, too. The house staff, the ranch hands, they looked at Nate, then at My Lin in her faded tunic and trousers, and the whispers started. "He brought a washerwoman. Is she a nurse? Why is he holding her arm?" Nate ignored them all. He led her to a guest room that was larger than her entire cabin. "Fresh clothes will be sent up. Dinner is in an hour." The dress that arrived was beautiful, a deep blue silk, clearly pulled from a stored trunk, perhaps belonging to his sister or late wife, but altered hastily to fit her slighter frame. When My Lin descended the grand staircase, silence fell over the hall. She held her head high. She was the daughter of a scholar, poor or not. She had dignity. Dinner was a feast, roast goose, potatoes, pies, wines. But the tension was palpable. A guest had arrived, a neighbor named Mrs. Calloway, a woman with sharp eyes and a sharper tongue. "Nathaniel," Mrs. Calloway said, slicing her meat with precision. "It is certainly Christian of you to offer charity to the unfortunate. But surely the girl would be more comfortable in the kitchen with the staff." My Lin froze. Sam looked up, sensing the hostility. Nate set his fork down. The sound clattered loudly in the quiet dining room. "My Lin is not a charity case, Mrs. Calloway," Nate said, his voice low and dangerous. "She is the woman who saved my life. She faced down a wolf pack to save my son when I was too weak to do it. She gave us her food when she had barely enough for herself." "Well," Mrs. Calloway sniffed. "That is commendable. I suppose one expects gratitude from such people." "Gratitude?" Nate laughed, a harsh, humorless sound. "I am the one who is grateful. And as for where she sits at my right hand. Tonight, and any night she chooses." He turned to My Lin, ignoring the shocked gasps of the table. "My Lin, ignore them. They measure worth in dollars and acres. You measured it in kindness when it cost you everything." My Lin looked at him, tears pricking her eyes. No one had ever defended her like that. Not since her father. After dinner, Nate found her on the sprawling veranda, looking out at the snow-covered ranch. "I am sorry about Mrs. Calloway," he said. "She speaks the truth of the world," My Lin said. "People will not understand, Nate. A millionaire rancher and a Chinese girl? They will laugh at you. They will shun you." "Let them," Nate said, moving closer. "I've spent the last year drowning in grief, worrying about what people expect of me. I'm done. I found more humanity in your one-room cabin than I've found in this entire mansion." He turned her to face him. The moonlight reflected off the snow, lighting up his rugged face. "Stay, My Lin. Not as a guest. Stay with us." "As what?" she asked, her heart pounding. "A governess? A housekeeper?" "As my partner," Nate said. "As everything." He took a breath, rushing on before he lost his nerve. I know it soon. I know it sounds crazy. But I know who you are. I saw you in the worst of times, and you were magnificent. I don't want to go back to a life without you in it. Mylin looked at him. She saw the lonely man in the snow, the loving father, the fierce protector. She realized that wealth didn't change the heart of the man she had met in the storm. It will be hard, she warned. They will not make it easy. I have a lot of fences on this ranch, Nate smiled, but I'll tear every single one down if they get in your way. Sam came running out onto the porch then, holding a wooden toy horse. My Papa! Look what was under the tree. He ran to them, stopping between them. He grabbed Nate's hand and Mylin's hand, pulling them together. Are you staying, My? Papa said he'd ask you. Mylin looked down at the boy, then up at the man who was offering her a home, not just a roof, but a true home. Yes, Sam, Mylin said, her voice steady and strong. I am staying. Nate let out a breath he seemed to have been holding for days. He squeezed her hand, bringing it to his lips for a kiss that was both a promise and a prayer. Merry Christmas, Mylin, he whispered. Merry Christmas, Nathaniel, she replied. The snow continued to fall softly over the valley, covering the tracks of the wolves and the hardships of the past, leaving a blank white canvas ready for a new story to be written. A story of a rancher, his son, and the woman who had opened her door and let love in from the cold.